and concluded by exhorting Simeonites to a freer use of the tub. I cannot commend my hero's humor in this matter. His tract was not brilliant, but I mention the fact as showing that at this time he was something of a Saul, and took pleasure in persecuting the elect, not, as I have said, that he had any hankering after skepticism, but because, like the farmers in his father's village, though he would not stand seeing the Christian religion made light of, he was not going to see it taken seriously. Ernest's friends thought his dislike for the Simeonites was due to his being the son of a clergyman who, it was known, bullied him. It is more likely, however, that it rose from an unconscious sympathy with them, which, as in St. Paul's case, in the end drew him into the ranks of those whom he had most despised and hated. Chapter 48. Once recently, when he was down at home after taking his degree, his mother had had a short conversation with him about his becoming a clergyman, set on thereto by Theobald, who shrank from the subject himself. This time it was during a turn taken in the garden, and not on the sofa, which was reserved for supreme occasions. "You know, my dearest boy," she said to him, "that Papa," she always called Theobald Papa when talking to Ernest, "is so anxious that you should not go into the church blindly, and without fully realizing the difficulties of a clergyman's position. He has considered all of them himself, and has been shown how small they are when they are faced boldly, but he wishes you two to feel them as strongly and completely as possible before committing yourself to irrevocable vows, so that you may never, never have to regret the step you will have taken." This was the first time Ernest had heard that there were any difficulties, and he had not unnaturally inquired in a vague way after their nature. "That, my dear boy," rejoined Christina, "is a question which I am not fitted to enter upon either by nature or education. I might easily unsettle your mind without being able to settle it again. Oh no, such questions are far better avoided by women, and I should have thought by men, but Papa wished me to speak to you upon the subject, so that there might be no mistake hereafter, and I have done so. Now, therefore, you know all." The conversation ended here, so far as this subject was concerned, and Ernest thought he did know all. His mother would not have told him he knew all, not about a matter of that sort, unless he actually did know it. Well, it did not come to very much. He supposed there were some difficulties, but his father, who at any rate was an excellent scholar and a learned man, was probably quite right here, and he need not trouble himself more about them. So little impression did the conversation make on him that it was not till long afterwards that, happening to remember it, he saw what a piece of sleight of hand had been practised upon him. Theobald and Christina, however, were satisfied that they had done their duty by opening their son's eyes to the difficulties of assenting to all a clergyman must assent to. This was enough. It was a matter of rejoicing that though they had been put so fully and candidly before him, he did not find them serious. It was not in vain that they had prayed for so many years to be made truly honest and conscientious. "And now, my dear," resumed Christina, after having disposed of all the difficulties that might stand in the way of Ernest's becoming a clergyman, "there is another matter on which I should like to have a talk with you. It is about your sister, Charlotte. You know how clever she is, and what a dear, kind sister she has been and always will be to yourself and Joey. I wish, my dearest Ernest, that I saw more chance of her finding a suitable husband than I do at Battersby, and I sometimes think you might do more than you do to help her." Ernest began to chafe at this, for he had heard it so often, but he said nothing. "You know, my dear, a brother can do so much for his sister if he lays himself out to do it. A mother can do very little. Indeed, it is hardly a mother's place to seek out young men. It is a brother's place to find a suitable partner for his sister. All that I can do is try to make Battersby as attractive as possible to any of your friends whom you may invite. And in that," she added, with a little toss of her head, "I do not think I have been deficient hitherto." Ernest said he had already at different times asked several of his friends. "Yes, my dear, but you must admit that they were none of them exactly the kind of young man whom Charlotte could be expected to take a fancy to. Indeed, I must own to having been a little disappointed that you should have yourself chosen any of these as your intimate friends." Ernest winced again. "You never brought down Figgins when you were at Roughborough. Now I should have thought Figgins would have been just the kind of boy whom you might have asked to come and see us." Figgins had been gone through times out of number already. Ernest had hardly known him, and Figgins, being nearly 3 years older than Ernest, had left long before he did. Besides, he had not been a nice boy, and had made himself unpleasant to Ernest in many ways. "Now," continued his mother, "there's Towneley. I have heard you speak of Towneley as having rowed with you in a boat at Cambridge. I wish, my dear, you would cultivate your acquaintance with Towneley and ask him to pay us a visit. The name has an aristocratic sound, and I think I have heard you say he is an eldest son." Ernest flushed at the sound of Towneley's name. What had really happened in respect of Ernest's friends was briefly this. His mother liked to get hold of the names of the boys, and especially of any who were at all intimate with her son. The more she heard, the more she wanted to know. There was no gorging her to satiety. She was like a ravenous young cuckoo being fed upon a grass plot by a water wagtail. She would swallow all that Ernest could bring her, and yet be as hungry as before. And she always went to Ernest for her meals rather than to Joey, for Joey was either more stupid or more impenetrable. At any rate, she could pump Ernest much the better of the two. From time to time an actual live boy had been thrown to her, either by being caught and brought to Battersby, or by being asked to meet her if at any time she came to Roughborough. She had generally made herself agreeable, or fairly agreeable, as long as the boy was present, but as soon as she got Ernest to herself again she changed her note. Into whatever form she might throw her criticisms, it came always in the end to this, that his friend was no good, that Ernest was not much better, and that he should have brought her someone else, for this one would not do at all. The more intimate the boy had been or was supposed to be with Ernest, the more he was declared to be naught, till in the end he had hit upon the plan of saying, concerning any boy whom he particularly liked, that he was not one of his especial chums, and that indeed he hardly knew why he had asked him, but he found he only fell on Scylla in trying to avoid Charybdis. For though the boy was declared to be more successful, it was Ernest who was not, for not thinking more highly of him. When she had once got hold of a name, she never forgot it. "And how is so-and-so?" she would exclaim, mentioning some former friend of Ernest's with whom he had either now quarrelled, or who had long since proved to be a mere comet and no fixed star at all. How Ernest wished he had never mentioned so-and-so's name, and vowed to himself that he would never talk about his friends in future, but in a few hours he would forget and would prattle away as imprudently as ever. Then his mother would pounce noiselessly on his remarks as a barn owl pounces upon a mouse, and would bring them up in a pellet 6 months afterwards, when they were no longer in harmony with their surroundings. Then there was Theobald. If a boy or college friend had been invited to Battersby, Theobald would lay himself out at first to be agreeable. He would do this well enough when he liked, and as regards the outside world he generally did like. His clerical neighbours, and indeed all his neighbours, respected him yearly more and more, and would have given Ernest sufficient cause to regret his imprudence if he had dared to hint that he had anything, however little, to complain of. Theobald's mind worked in this way. Now, I know Ernest